Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Happy 4th of July. I hope you're enjoying it. We have a special 2-hour, supersized, super patriotic show for you tonight. Just before you joined us in the last half hour, President Donald Trump signed the big bill in the Oval Office. He calls it beautiful. The American people don't seem to agree. A bill that is so wildly unpopular, it screws many of the people who voted for Trump. And still, no one could really muster like a good actual affirmative account for it. It's going to cut Medicaid as it cut taxes for the rich. It's going to cut food aid like SNAP, while it throws billions of dollars at the Immigration, Customs and Enforcement. It's bad all around. It repeals all sorts of energy provisions that are key to the success we've had in building up the energy future. Because Donald Trump generally does actually have pretty good instincts on how to market things, the lipstick they've slapped on this pig is kind of funny. It ends up being the things that he came up with on the fly during the campaign. Remember, there was that sort of period of time where he was doing like, you get a tax cut, you get a tax cut. Things that are, by the way, temporary and extremely limited. For example, the big one that he keeps talking about is no tax on tips. And that does sound kind of populist, although do we want to incentivize tips? No. But that's limited to a maximum deduction of $25,000 a year. And it abruptly cuts off at the end of 2028, just before Trump's term is over. It's a similar story with the no tax on overtime, which is capped at $12,500 a year. It also ends just 3.5 years from now. Meanwhile, you might be asking, well, I wonder if they're all temporary provisions in this bill. No, my dear. The New York Times points out the bill provides its most generous tax breaks early on and reserve some of its most painful benefit cuts until after the 2026 midterm elections. For example, the Medicaid work requirements that are going to kick a lot of people off Medicaid start in 2027. The cuts to Medicaid and food assistance are set to start in 2028, right as tips and overtime start getting taxed again. A lot of people, as much as 20 million people could lose their health care, up to 7 million people could lose their food assistance, including 2 million children. Everywhere you look, you can see that Republicans do kind of understand this is not a great bill. Regular voting Americans do, too. Take a look at these 3 polls. They're all conducted around the same time last month, asking people if they support or they oppose the bill. Across the board, it's really consistent, pretty much 20 to 30 points underwater. Trump is certainly aware people hate this bill, which is why he focuses on those small, temporary provisions that are literally just slivers of the entirety of this bill, right, which is trillions of dollars, that sound much more populist than what the bill actually is. They're tiny percentages and very limited, and he gets this, which is why at the signing today, an event that would normally be all about the actual landmark legislation he's signing, he basically said, look over there, making news by inviting the bomber pilots who conducted the strikes on Iran rather than having the main focus be on the big bill. I should tell you, it's unclear if those pilots were even able to attend due to security concerns. There was a flyover by a B-2 bomber and airmen from Whiteman Air Force Base. Those families were in attendance. Again, all this is happening because Donald Trump and the Republican Party know that the less people pay attention to the actual bill, the better it is. Cutting taxes, they're skewed towards the top, and cutting some social services or health care or something like that to pay for them.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Republicans are counting on the fact that maybe Americans won't pay attention to what's in the bill, but clearly that's not the case. And I think you could hear that when Leader Hakeem Jeffries was on the floor for his marathon 1 minute, really describing in great detail what was in the bill and who would be hurt. And despite Republicans delaying some of the provisions that will hurt the most, the loss of health care, the cuts to nutrition programs, the college cuts, those things that Democrats are still going to have a lot to chew on in this bill to describe to the American people. And it's unpopular now. It will become more unpopular as we get closer to the midterms.
They are ashamed of this bill. And despite how they're acting in public, behind the scenes, and even still somewhat in front of the cameras when you look closely, they hate it. We've already seen multiple Republicans quit. Multiple Congress people say they're not running again after this bill is passed, right? Or during the debate of the bill. After this passage of the bill, people are saying, I'm not running again. Trump views all 200 and some members of the House and all 53, 54, whatever it is, Republican senators. He views them all as his employees, and some of them are saying, I quit. I'm out. I'm not running again. We've seen that. But also, guys, keep in mind this, that they made a lot of the cuts structured to not happen right now. If they were proud of this bill, it would all kick in immediately. But they're trying to hide it from you. And this second part here, guys, a Democratic congressman who's seen things we can only imagine, drops the bomb.
Congressman, you had a very interesting journey to get back for this vote. There were weather delay issues, and you ended up driving from Chicago to Washington, D.C. Take me into the Democratic caucus meetings and conversations in the lead up to yesterday and then obviously this morning and this afternoon. What we saw in Leader Jeffries using the Magic Minute is a tool that has been used previously. Kevin McCarthy used it in 2021. Speaker Pelosi used it in 2018. It is, some people say, oh, this is for show, but it is a tool in the toolbox. And when you are not in the majority, there are a couple tools one should utilize. And this was an opportunity for Leader Jeffries to corral the moment and had Democrats behind him. Talk to us about how y'all came to this point.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I ended up taking a 14-hour car ride from the western part of Illinois, where we started a listening tour in downstate Illinois, where I'm originally from. And after 14 hours and a lot of Doritos, I ended up in Washington. And a lot of my colleagues embarked on similar adventures because the stakes are so high with this bill. We had to be here for every part of the debate and, of course, the vote. I think that with regard to the Magic Minute, I think that Hakeem Jeffries did what he had to do, which is A, lay out the significant harm and devastation that this bill does to working families. And the statistic that just jumps out is the 17 million people who will be left uninsured because of this particular bill, which I call the large, lousy law. And of course, Trump calls the big, beautiful bill. And Leader Jeffries, Freudian slip, he illustrated the harm by talking about specific stories of real people who would be hurt. And I thought that was very moving and powerful. Also, he charted the way forward after this bill passes. What does it mean for a Republican who says that he cares about his constituents or she cares about their constituents to vote for this bill, which runs contrary to the interests of their constituents? I think that we have to hold them accountable as well. And that's what I think he was alluding to through talking about Project 2026.
Representative Shelton, I look at the storylines that have evolved over the last few weeks leading up to this vote today, and I think about candidates like yourself, both you and the congressman running for higher office, if you will. And there's something the congressman just said that kind of sticks with me about how the constituents of the individual Republican members will hold them accountable. And my response is, will they? Really? Because right now, Republicans are sitting here, they're in nirvana. They've gotten everything they've wanted since January 20th. They have been virtually unstoppable. And along that path, the deconstruction of the administrative state through the elevation of DOGE, the stripping away of federal programs like USAID, the firing of federal workers who administer a large part of the programs that these very constituents will need and already have begun to feel the impact from. And yet, and still, I don't see a hue and cry. So how do you, in your current role and in your future role, make the case that what happened today is a turning point in our country that will be very difficult to come back from if the right kind of leadership does not emerge now?
You are exactly right. And this is what I've dedicated myself right now until November 2026 to go from Larchwood to Keokuk, Hamburg to Decorah to talk about this. And what this bill doesn't bring, things like it doesn't solve the rising cost of things. It's making the recession more likely. It's going to the inflation lasts longer, and it's just going to rise costs on over 80 million Americans. And that, along with kicking people off their health care, with rural hospitals closing. We saw already one today in Nebraska, just on the threat of this bill being closed. This is going to be devastating for Iowa. And, politics is about improving people's lives, according to Paul Wellstone, one of my heroes. And this bill does nothing to improve Iowans' lives.
I will tell you, Congressman Krishnamurthy, I disagree with Michael that all Republicans are in nirvana here. I think there are a handful of Republicans, either the fiscal hawks, who know they didn't live up to their part of the bargain with their voters, or the folks who know that kicking 12 million people off Medicaid is political suicide. Those folks are not in nirvana. And part of the tell is that they keep talking about the possibility of just fixing the bill later. I want you to take a listen to what Representative Ralph Norman had to say earlier on CNBC.
We accepted the bill as is. What's different is President Trump is going to use his powers to, like on the subsidies, to make sure that a lot of these subsidies won't remain in effect.
It sounds to me in some way that you were saying that the president persuaded you by saying that he is going to some degree, override some of the provisions in the bill. Is that right?
No, he's not going to override it. He's going to have accountability is the best way to describe it. I think some executive orders you'll see come down the pipe, which will be good.
Congressman, is that how any of this works?
No, I mean, first of all, I think that you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people on the other side were brave until they caved, basically. And I think that Donald Trump, through inducements, through threats, through side deals, through maybe these vague promises, these illusory promises with regard to like somehow overriding the legislation, is what got some people to vote yes when they supposedly originally were no. But I would just point to what Tom Tillis did in the Senate.
You can see it's a bad bill. Again, with Biden's bill, with Biden's infrastructure bill, and look, spending infrastructure money takes time, of course. You can't just instantly spend hundreds of billions of dollars, right? You can't do it. But they started on that ASAP, right? As soon as possible, right? Because, one, it was good politically. You get the money out there. It's good for voters to see that you're doing it. But also because they were proud of it. Biden was proud of the infrastructure bill, and Democrats in Congress were proud of it as well. It wasn't perfect, but there was a lot to celebrate. In this bill, it's all evil. So all of the bad things they're doing, they're trying to either hide them from you under code words and euphemism, or they're going to make it all happen after the midterms and hope you forget about it. But you're not going to.